13.7 billion years ago, everything in this vast universe of ours was contained in an infinitesimally small point of great density and great heat. Suddenly there was an explosion and an expansion began, ballooning our universe outwards faster than the speed of light. This expansion lasted only a tiny fraction of a second, but when it came to an abrupt and mysterious end, a flood of matter and radiation began populating the universe. It started populating the universe with particles and atoms and neutrons, protons, electrons. All of this happened within the first second after the universe began. So our existence, the existence of everything that we know, everything literally, far and near, is the result of the ephemeral. 66 million years ago, an asteroid the size of a small city collided into the Earth somewhere near the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This created the second largest crater on Earth, but when the impact happened, it also triggered a worldwide tsunami and wiped out more than 60% of Earth's population. The asteroid that started its journey somewhere beyond the orbit of Jupiter, and its impact was totally ephemeral, and it changed the course of the history of the Earth and its inhabitants. In 1857, in Meerut, India, the sepoys in the army of the East India Company rebelled against it because of the presence of cow and pig fat in the casings of the bullets of the Enfield rifle. You see, they had to pull the casings off with their mouth and then pour the gunpowder into the rifle. Mangal Pandey's rebellion against that and his subsequent execution in Barrackpur led to the mutiny becoming nationwide. It went all across India, but then it was quashed by the British, but not before the seeds of rebellion had been firmly planted into the consciousness of the Indian people, who had been under suppression and subjugation of its colonizers for more than 100 years by then. In 1893, Barrister Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was thrown off a train's first-class compartment, which at the time was reserved for whites only. This ephemeral action of racism that happened to him, that he experienced in South Africa, triggered a spirit of rebellion in him, which manifested in the civil disobedience, the peaceful civil disobedience that he followed during his time in South Africa. And he very effectively used that when he came back to India during the Indian independence movement. In 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie were assassinated by a Bosnian Serb student who was part of a 6-man assassination team. Outraged by the assassination, why did they assassinate him? They assassinated him because they wanted to overthrow the Austro-Hungarian rule in Serbia. Outraged by the assassination, Austro-Hungarian ally Germany invaded Serbian ally Russia and also France via Belgium, which made Britain enter the war by attacking Germany. And that's how began the First World War, or the Great War, which changed the course of the history of the world again. Ephemeral, one bullet. In 1925, in Hitler's biography, Mein Kampf, he describes how he wanted to become a professional artist, but that his dream is unfulfilled because he applies twice to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and is rejected not once but twice, in 1907 and then in 1908. The Academy says it felt that he could not draw human faces. It's quite ironic, isn't it? And that he drew buildings better and that he was better suited to be an architect. Can you imagine what the history of the world would have seemed like or been like if Hitler had been busy painting away on a canvas in 1939 instead of invading Poland? That invasion of Poland drew Britain and France into a war when they declared war on Germany, and that's how the Second World War began. Then came Japan's ill-advised attack of America at Pearl Harbor, and then, of course, that changed the war. It brought America into the war, and the war only ended when America bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How many ephemeral moments and how much it changed the course of the war, just in that little period of time. Little things that changed here and there, which were not so little and severely consequential. Isn't that the story of every war? At this very moment in history, India saw an opportunity to overthrow her colonizers of 200 years, who had ripped out incredible amounts of resources and rendered her into a poverty that the world would see over a multitude of decades to come. In a multi-pronged approach to freedom, which was not necessarily planned or known to either, Mahatma Gandhi pursued satyagraha, while Subhash Chandra Bose sent his Indian National Army to fight in the forests of Myanmar on the side of the Axis, on the side of the Japanese. But in the end, civil disobedience, peaceful civil disobedience, paved the way to our independence, but not without a cost. In addition to the lives that we lost during the freedom struggle, we hardly ever hear an account of the millions of lives that were lost during the Great Bengal famine, because all the grain that was being grown in India was being sent to the front of the Second World War to feed the British Army. And then, of course, hundreds of thousands perished during the violence that ensued after partition, when people were crossing Durand's line that slashed a nation into two. In 1967, the great boxing legend Muhammad Ali was drafted into the US Army. They wanted for him to go and fight in the Vietnam War. During his induction, they called his name 3 times. You know that there was a name conundrum there, right? Cassius Clay was his given name, and Muhammad Ali was his chosen name. They called his name thrice, and he refused to step forward. While he said that he didn't have a quarrel with the Viet Cong, he said in multiple documentaries and interviews that he did later on that he felt like he had a lot more to fight for at home. This moment got him banned from boxing, but his stand brought the racial polarization into the mainstream at a time when a generation of African Americans were going through great strife at great personal cost to make their voices heard in the halls of power in America. One of these voices was strong and unwavering, the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who spoke those famous words, "I have a dream." He dreamt of an America and a world where all humans were equal, had equal opportunity to live healthy, productive, fulfilling, and prosperous lives. He led the civil rights movement in the USA from the 1950s until his assassination in 1968. His death, of course, galvanized all the African American movements in America. But during his lifetime, his activism and leadership led to multiple gains that the movement saw. For example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. His method of protest was peaceful civil disobedience. Are we following a trend here? His assassination, of course, left an unfillable void and a mission that was far from finished. In 1984, India saw multiple ephemeral moments. The assassination of Indira Gandhi by her Sikh bodyguards, which gave rise to hate crimes against the Sikh community, the aftermath of which is still playing out in the arena of international current affairs. A story like this is never black and white, many sides of the story to tell. Then we had the Bhopal gas tragedy. A lot of us read it in the newspapers those days. A lot of us watched it on the news, but recently I think there was a series that was made that's on one of the streaming platforms that really kind of captures what it might have been that night. The bomb that detonated in the Madras airport, which was intended for Sri Lanka, killing many, but underlining the violence that existed in the subcontinent and the island nation at that time. What of hunger? Hunger is a word we don't hear so much in the news these days, but it was very present in the 80s. Africa was reeling. Many parts of Africa are still reeling. We don't hear it in the news. But in 1985, 80 of the most famous musicians from UK and USA and the other parts of the world staged a 16-hour-long concert in London and Philadelphia to raise money to send food, medicine, and other vital necessities to the people of Ethiopia. It all started with a song, Do They Know It's Christmas? Have you heard it? Do they know it's Christmas time at all? This was a song by Bob Geldof and Midge Ure. And it featured a lot of popular artists at the time. And it kind of became, like 5 minutes of this song that people listened to, galvanized them into wanting to do something about it. And that's how, this synergy came about and a Live 8 concert followed, which turned out to be one of the most successful charity events ever in the world, and it gave the world one of its most memorable moments in music history, 20 minutes of Queen. You do know that song. There is an audience here, right? Okay. In 1990, after 27 years in imprisonment, Nelson Mandela walked free. President F.W. de Klerk, elected in 1989, lifted the ban on Mandela's African National Congress Party, followed a non-violent approach to protest the racial subjugation of the black majority in South Africa under apartheid. The whole world celebrated his release. He was a story of empowerment to people of color everywhere in the world. The ephemeral moment of Mandela's release changed the narrative of an entire nation. In fact, that is one of the few nations that raises its voice again and again against war and violence in other parts of the world. In 2001, the world was never the same again, when 2 planes flew head-on into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, killing many people. As a result, the world again stood on the brink of another world war, and the impacts are still being felt today. In 2008, a beacon of hope came into the White House, Barack Obama. But then there was another shock, the Lehman shock. The world of finance reeled under a shocking crash brought on by malpractice in the financial system. In an unforgettably witty speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011, a very suave and in control Barack Obama proceeded to mock Donald Trump in what was hailed as a mammoth takedown, until the latter, triggered by the insults, ran for office, became president, and let's see what happens next. The election of Trump set ablaze the world of comedy across the board, making political satire of fine art. Speaking of art, in the world of art, self-expression came onto the streets in the form of graffiti, movement, spontaneous music. Thinking of street art, graffiti takes me to the streets of Valparaiso, Bogota, Santiago de Chile. These are often created in the deep shadows of the night by brilliant artists who understand the ephemeral nature of graffiti art, yet take time and think and make provocative statements about current affairs that affect them in places where everyone can access them, on the streets. Music too can be ephemeral and completely accessible to everyone. That is really the world that I inhabit. The world of music making, spontaneous musicality. Can we make music spontaneously? I'll tell you the answer is yes, because I'm running out of time. But in conclusion, our entire existence, our origins, our lives, are absolutely defined by the ephemeral, by swift moments in time that create ripple upon ripple of after effects, the effects of which we see for years and years to come. What I've tried to paint here is what occurred to me as an ephemeral panorama encapsulating a few key moments from the origin of the earth to this moment in time. But I want to leave you with a question. What, from the lens that you look through, is your ephemeral panorama?